Morning. Thank you, Farhi, for your beautiful words of inspiration, always a kavod. Today's program is dedicated when walls fall, 70th Tammuz, in loving memory, Lun Nishmat of beloved Rabbi Shlomo Lankri, Alav Shalom, Zechasag Levracha, Shlomo ben Rachel, on his yasa by Frida and Adam Azrak. Friends, this is a tough time of the year. I just returned a few days ago from visiting my family in London. If you want to know a country that is suffering greatly in a number of ways, let alone the Jewish people who are living there, London is it. When I grew up in London, you could visit pretty much anywhere in the city and you were relatively safe. You could wear a kippah, a Magin David, Star of David. You were pretty much okay. I was with my sister. I said I want to go to a certain store, which I like to go to, center of town. It's a very beautiful store. It's got a big, beautiful food hall. It's called Harrods. You may have heard of it. And I can't buy much of the food there, but it's just cool to see this amazing store. And my sister said, "You're not going. Let alone the fact that Qatar owns it. You're supporting this terrorist regime. But just walking around there, if they recognize you as a Jew, that's it. They'll make comments, they shout, and maybe get violent with you. You can't go." We're living in crazy times. My parents, they should live and be well. They live on an apartment building right opposite the Beit Knesset, where they really spend most of their time now. And there's a lady who lives next door to my parents. Her name is Martha. She's 102 years old. She's a Holocaust survivor. My mother, a number of years ago, took it upon herself to make food for this lady every Erev Shabbat and bring her enough food to last the Shabbat and some. I'd never met her. I'd heard about it. I'd never met her before. So I was sitting with my parents in their apartment, and my father said, "Oh, you got to meet Martha. She doesn't have many people visiting her. She lost a child many years ago. Her husband died 40 years ago, whatever it is. She's pretty much alone. Sometimes grandkids come visit, but not too much." So she called Martha up, and she came straight over. I've never seen such a young and sprightly 102. I haven't seen many 102-year-olds at all. And she came straight over, and my father made some popcorn, and we sat down, and we spoke at great length about her life, what she went through, her time in the camps, her times in Theresienstadt, which she was adamant telling me was not what the Nazis made it into, like some kind of camp. It was a terrible, terrible place. And she talked about her life. And then she said, "Lawrence, I want you to come to my home. I want to show you my home. I want to show you my photographs." Okay, we're going to say no to a 102-year-old lady. As soon as I walk in, the first photograph that greets me was a photograph of the Queen, Queen Elizabeth II, who has since passed away, because there's a custom in England that everybody who reaches 100 years old gets a signed letter from the Queen. This is the way it is. It's a famous thing in Great Britain. You reach 100, you get a letter. Just reaching that threshold, boom, you're in. So there's this big card on the table. I took a photo of it, and you open it up. Congratulations on reaching 100 years old. Blessing, success, whatever it is. And there's the signature of the Queen of England. I guess now the King Charles has to sign off on this nowadays. And we sat and we were talking, and this woman, by the way, has the mental acuity, unbelievable, of a 50-year-old. Incredible. Remembers everything. And then she turned around to me and she said, "What do you do?" I said, "I'm a rabbi. I'm a rabbi in Manhattan, one of the rabbanim of a wonderful synagogue, and I teach, I lecture." And she says, "I want you to tell the people back in America that I'm 102 years old. I was born in Europe. I went through the Holocaust. I went through wars in Israel." She was there for a couple of the wars till she moved to Great Britain. And she says, "In my 102 years that I've been alive, I've never seen it more difficult for the Jewish people than I'm seeing it today." That's what she told me. That is what I had to hear a 102-year-old woman tell me on my trip to London. Baruch Hashem, I was there for Kibbutz Avim. I have no other reason to go to London at all except to visit my family. I went to my father's Beit Knesset. I got 2 suitcases, because I use points, to go to London. So one suitcase, how much clothing did I have? I was there for like 5 days. So one suitcase had a little bit of clothing. And then I brought a big suitcase that I filled full of candy. Candy. Why? Because my father, he should live and be well, he's 86 years old, Ad Me'ah V'Esrim and more, is the candy man. He's the candy man of the Beit Knesset. The kids come to him, and every time I go visit, I feel bad that I'm not part of this mitzvah. Because he's the oldest person at Beit Knesset, and he has all the young kids come to him, and he's handing out the Laffy Taffies, and he's handing out. So I said, I want to be part of this mitzvah, plus the candy in America is much cheaper. So I brought a suitcase just full of candy. I brought it to my father's apartment. I said, this is for you to hand out. He's like, I got no room for this. There's not a room in the apartment for all the candy. So I stuck in his office. Someone's got bags and bags and bags of candy sitting there. The Chazon Ish was asked, if you were not the great rabbi that you were, what job would you have loved to have done? And he says, I would love to be the candy man in the Beit Knesset. That's the job I wish I had. That is a true story. Why? Why is that special? Because such a person brings simcha and happiness to other people, especially children in the Beit Knesset. I never forget, I must tell you a story. When I was a child, I used to go to a certain Beit Knesset, and they would have board meet. The board would get together, they were called the wardens, and they would meet and they would talk and discuss. And it came up, I remember hearing about this, I wasn't there, I wasn't a warden, I was a kid, that the board were upset that the rabbi was the candy man. His name was Rabbi Silberg, Zecher Tzedek Levracha. He was the candy man. And all the children would come up. And by the way, England is very proper. You know, the wardens would sit, which I happen to like, by the way, in the front row, wearing top hats. That's the way they would sit. Very regal. And it's England, it's very formal. And all the kids would be coming up into the bimah, and it was a very big Beit Knesset, taking candy from the rabbi. And they said, we want to change this custom, we want to give this job to somebody else. I never forget this. The rabbi stood up, gave it to Rosh Hashanah Shabbat, and said, if you stop me giving candy to the kids, then fire me. And he meant it. I do not want to be in this Beit Knesset. This is not the synagogue for me. Because if they don't see me as someone who takes care of their spiritual, as care of their physical, and wants to give sweetness of Torah to the children, I don't want the job. And he kept that position for many years of being the candy man in that Beit Knesset. These are difficult times. These are difficult times, my friends. Times when machloket among ourselves, let alone among us and the other nations, is the highest I've ever seen in my 52 years of being on this earth. It's incredible. There's time for machloket, but there's also time, my friends, there's time to have peace and shalom. You know, many years ago, I went to when I was a bachor in Eretz Yisrael. You know, when you're a bachor, you're a single boy, your parents are there, you go and eat to people's homes, you meet various different people and hear their stories. I must tell you one thing that happened to me many, many years ago. I walked on Shabbat to a certain apartment in Malo Daphna, can't remember where it was, we're talking 30 years ago. And I walked to the apartment and the walls were all empty. But there was one frame on the wall, and inside the frame were 2 envelopes. It's unusual. 2 envelopes framed on the wall. It's old Yerushalayim apartment, like barely any furniture, but there's a wall with a frame with 2 envelopes. And I looked at them and I saw there was the name of the person who I was eating by. So during the meal I said, do you want me asking you, why'd you have 2 envelopes on your wall framed? And he told me something amazing. He said they had to remind me that it's not worth fighting about. I was like, well, what happened? Was this like an invitation to one of your bar mitzvah or something? He said, I'll tell you what happened. Many years ago in another apartment I used to live in, I had a neighbor. And me and the neighbor, we didn't really like each other. We didn't have any fights at all, But he just got on my nerves, I got on his nerves, parking, shopping, comments. It just wasn't nice. We just didn't like each other. That happens sometimes. Nevertheless, one day, one of his kids got married, and he sent me an invitation to the wedding. And I opened up the invitation, the envelope, and it was empty. And I said to my wife, wow, what kind of man is this? What kind of man? He knows I don't like him. He doesn't like me. So he sends me an invitation to his son's wedding, and he deliberately leaves out the contents of the invitation as if to say, I'm having an event and you're not invited. I was furious. I said to my wife, that's it. We didn't argue up to now. Now we're going to argue. And for 2-3 days, I was thinking of ways to get back at him. Happened to be sitting with my Rabbanim, and he saw that I was agitated. He said, well, guys, I'll tell you what happened. You know that guy lives next door to me? I don't like, he doesn't like me. And he sent me an invitation to the wedding of his son, and it was empty. There was no invitation inside. He's mocking me, and I'm going to get him for it. And the rabbi said to him calmly, could it be that by mistake he left out the invitation to the wedding? And he's like, come on, Rabbi. Has that ever happened to you? Did you ever get an envelope in your life that was empty? And the rabbi said, no, actually I haven't. He goes, have you ever in your life, ever, heard of someone get an envelope that was empty? He goes, no, I've never heard such a thing. He goes, you see, it's not possible. 2-3 days later, I got another invitation from somebody else. I opened up the envelope, it was empty. He said, wow, it must have been a mistake. How can it, what messages, 2 envelopes in 1 week, both empty? I went to the man, I told him he sent me the invitation, he says, oh, it must have been a mistake. I promise you I did not mean it. From that point on, they were best friends. I took these 2 envelopes, and whenever I feel I want to get to machloket, and I feel I want to get angry with someone, I give them benefit of the doubt. I look at those 2 envelopes, and I tell my kids they're sick of hearing about it. They get angry. I say, look at the envelopes. Always trying to find the righteousness in other people's actions. You know, David HaMelech says in Tehillim, Shiftecha u'mishantecha, hema yenachamoni. Your staff and your stick, they comfort me. What's the difference between a shevet, a staff, and a misha'en, a stick? So the rabbis tell us that a shevet is a rod that is used for hitting things, like hitting a rock. Moshe Rabbeinu, he had a shevet. A misha'en is a stick that we use to help us move along, like what we would call today a walking stick. So we have 2 sticks for 2 very different purposes. One is used for hitting, and one is used for supporting. And we say to Hashem, David HaMelech says, Shiftecha u'mishantecha, hema yenachmoni. Both the hitting, Hashem, you give me, the difficulties and the challenges, and the machloket that we have to deal with, and the misha'en, the walking stick you give me to support me in my difficult times, they're both for my benefit. All these challenges we have to realize that we're going through as Am Yisrael, as Klal Yisrael, are ultimately there for our benefit. Sometimes, however, machloket must be avoided to the utmost. I'm going to share with you a Gemara, a very famous Gemara, about Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yoshua, just to show how sometimes machloket is warranted and sometimes it must be avoided at all costs. There's the extraordinary Gemara about a machloket, whether arvit, the evening prayer, is chovah or reshut. Is it obligatory or is it a voluntary prayer? I know it sounds weird because we know we pray 3 times a day. Shacharit, mincha, arvit. And yet, that's not the way it was. There was a time when Shacharit mincha corresponded to the korbanot, the tamid that was brought every single day. But you should know that arvit came along later because there were certain korbanot that were not completely consumed in the morning or the afternoon, and they would burn up the extra pieces. Sometimes there are no extra pieces of the early korbanot, so they didn't need to be brought up, and they didn't have to be burnt. And so arvit actually is not one of the formal korbanot sacrifices that were brought in the Beit Hamkidash. So there was a machloket. After the destruction of the second Beit Hamkidash, between Rabbi Gamliel, who was the Nasi, he was the great leader of the Jewish people, and Rabbi Yoshua, who was also a great rabbi, but not the same level. And they were living in a city called Yavne. And Yavne is in the north of Israel. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai asked the Romans, said, listen, please give us one city to keep Torah going, for the Chachamim to continue learning Torah. He says, go to Yavne. So that became the epicenter. There's no more Beit HaMikdash, and they're still learning Torah. And this question came to the Beit Midrash between Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yoshua. Arvit, Chova or Reshut? And Rabbi Gamliel said, Chova, it's an obligation. And Rabbi Yoshua said, no, it's Reshut. And they had a big machloket, a big argument. And Rabbi Gamliel got so upset with Rabbi Yoshua, he says, for the rest of the day or the rest of the week, you have to stand. Just so you understand what that means. It used to be that the great students would be sitting, and the lesser students would be standing around. So it was actually a sign of great embarrassment for him and demotion. He's pretty much saying, you get to stand, I'm demoting you because you come against me. By the way, this dispute between Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Yoshua happened in other areas. Happens to be that there was a dispute between them about when Yom Kippur fell out one year. And Rabbi Gamliel said it's this date, and Rabbi Yoshua said another date. And Rabbi Gamliel made Rabbi Yoshua come to him on his date with his staff and money in his pocket to say, you're definitely going to hold by what I say. Rabbi Gamliel was very heavy-handed. And you would have thought, that's fantastic. Keeping Torah, keeping mitzvot, that's the way a Av Beit Din has to be, a Nasi. And yet, the rabbis decided that Rabbi Gamliel was too heavy-handed, and they fired him. And they kicked him out. And he lost his job. And that's the whole story of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. He was only 18 years old. He was nominated to take over. They couldn't give it to Yoshua because he was part of the machloket. He took over, right? And he said to his wife, what am I going to do? I'm only 18 years old. They know I'm only 18 years old. He says, don't worry. We say in the Haggadah, they made him look Shivim Shana, like 70 years old. He had some white hairs appeared in his beard, right, which goes to show everybody knew he's 18, but if you look old, you are old. Right? It's true then and it's true now as well. It worked. And he became the great Nasi over there in Yavne of the entire Jewish people. Why? Why did Rabbi Gamliel get fired? So I heard from my rabbi something very, very important. This was a good machloket. It was a machloket l'shem shemayim. A machloket definitely for the sake of Hashem, for the sake of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But even those machloket that we have among ourselves, even they sometimes should be avoided at all costs, because the temple had just been destroyed. They knew it. They'd seen it. They saw the result of machloket. They saw what fighting can do. It destroys. It destroyed our temple. It's destroying our communities. It's destroying us. It's killing us all. And therefore, there's no place for you, Rabbi Gamliel. You're fired. And he lost his job. And by the way, in case you think that his motivations were not l'shem shemayim, the Gemara continues, and most people don't read the rest of the Gemara, that straight away he went straight to the Beit Midrash and continued learning. If it had just been for his ego, if he'd been fighting for his own kavod, his own honor, take a day off, take a week off, lick your wounds, be upset, and either start your own Beit Midrash. You know, that's what most people would do. No, he went back to the same Beit Midrash. Rabbi Yeshua is there. Elazar ben Azariah is there. He sat down, opened up his sefer, continued learning. This shows us that everything he did was for l'shem shemayim, and yet there are times, and we are in those times right now. There is no room for machloket. We're getting enough from outside sources. We don't need to fight among ourselves. We need to find every single way to avoid as much machloket as we can. Havedan et kol adam. Lakaf zchut. We have to judge every person on the side of correctness, of mercy, of merit. If there's a chance to have machloket, if you see someone do something and you can interpret it that they did something vengeful towards you, or you can interpret it that they did something positive towards you, you have to go towards the zchut. And that's why there is an extra, hey, havedan et kol ha'adam. How do you say every person? Kol adam. A judge everyone favorably, lekaf zchut. It doesn't say that. It says havedan et kol ha'adam. As if to say judge the entire person. What does that mean, the entire person? Don't just judge one thing they did to you. Judge all the good stuff they did to you. Judge what they're going through in their lives. Judge the parnasah problems they may have, or the shidduchim problems they or their children have. Judge everything. Now you can when you put it all together, when you look at et kol ha'adam, the entire person, now you have a chance. Now you're starting maybe to figure out who that person is. You know, there's a cute story about a young boy who's convinced he's a mouse. Convinced he's a mouse. And every day he's eating cheese and cheese only. And he sleeps curled up in the corner of the room. He mamash thinks he's a mouse, and he walks around with his paws in front of him. And his parents are like, well, this has gone too much, you know? So they take him to a psychotherapist. And the psychotherapist sits with his kid day in and day out. He says, repeat after me, I'm not a mouse. I am a human. I'm not a mouse. I'm a human. Days, weeks. Eventually the psychologist says, I've cracked it, calls the parents and say, come pick him up. We've cured this young boy. He doesn't think he's a mouse anymore. Fantastic. They come, pick him up. They thank the psychotherapist. They walk out to the parking lot. Suddenly, the boy runs and hides under a car. And the parents are like, what? We thought he's cured. And they walk over to him and they say, son, you're not a mouse. What are you doing hiding under the car? And he says, there's a cat. And he says, you're not a mouse. And the boy said, I know I'm not a mouse, but does the cat know I'm not a mouse? It's a deep story. You've got to think about it. I tell you what I learned from this story. If we walk around feeling that we are nothing but mice, they are going to treat us like that, and we are going to be seen as victims in our own eyes. And that is not the way Hashem wants us. Because we are B'nai Melachim, we are B'nai Nevi'im, we have a special mission in this world. But if every time something comes forward, we hide under the car, because we're afraid they're going to see us as mice, then forget about it. Close the whole Jewish shop and let's all go home. We have a tremendous power in this world. We have tremendous kochot that we have to bring to this world, especially now. The one thing that's preventing us from fulfilling our mission, my dear friends, without a shadow of a doubt, is machloket. I remember many years ago, I was at a Beit Knesset. This particular Beit Knesset had a minhag, which and many do, that the chatan, the groom, gets maftir and gets to be called up last, big zchut, maftir. I remember the Gabbai, who was a big tzaddik, didn't give the chatan maftir, he gave it to a very wealthy guy in the community who'd come to visit. Wow. The whispering, the talking, you mamash could not hear the maftir because everyone was talking in the Beit Knesset. How could he? That's our minhag. He's the chatan. Everybody knows the chatan gets maftir. How can he do such a terrible thing? And he gave it to that rich man. What? Because he's rich, he gets maftir? That's the way we act. Wow. I thought there was going to be civil war in the Beit Knesset. Fortunately, the chatan overheard all this arguing. And he went to the front of the Beit Knesset. And he said, let me tell you something. I asked the Gabbai of the Beit Knesset not to give me maftir. Although I'm the chatan, I know this is your minhag. Why? Because I'm a very shy person. And when I get embarrassed, I don't read so well. And I didn't want to read the brachot of the Haftorah. And the person who gets maftir reads the brachot of Haftarah, if not the entire Haftarah. I didn't want to do that, so I asked him not to do it. So please judge in favor of me. Can you imagine had this boy not got up, had the presence of mind to announce it? This entire Beit Knesset would have blown apart. That would have been it. The end to any shalom in the Beit Knesset. It all, my friends, would have come to an end. For the past 4 or 5 Monday nights, I've been giving a series on Daniel the prophet. Absolutely fascinating. I've learned things by studying and reading the Abarbanel's commentary, which I never knew before. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. Both Daniel and another prophet called Zechariah had visions of Mashiach's arrival. Actually, Daniel is the only person except for Yaakov Avinu who knew the exact date of Mashiach's arrival. But he wasn't allowed to reveal it. He hinted at it and he put certain, dare I say it, codes inside the book of Daniel to reveal it. People are able to figure it out. It's very difficult to do. And many Rabbanim, Gedolim, Rishonim among them, including Rashi, have tried to figure out the exact arrival time of Mashiach. Anyway, Daniel sees Mashiach's arrival in a very, very different way to Zechariah. Daniel, in chapter 7, sees Mashiach coming in clouds from Shemayim, in heavens descending upon us. A beautiful description of a very brave, courageous, smart, spiritual individual coming in clouds of heavens, being wafted in on clouds. Zechariah, chapter 9, verse 9, sees a very different depiction of Mashiach's arrival. He sees him, and all of you have heard this, like a ani, a poor person, rochev, riding al chamor on a donkey. Now, if there are 2 more different revelations of Mashiach's arrival, this is probably one of the biggest ones, right? Which one is it? Is he coming wafting in on clouds, right? Fluffy, lovely clouds, having conversation with Hashem and Shemayim and descending upon us? Or is he coming on a donkey? Let me tell you something. The donkey version, not so good. I don't want my Mashiach arriving on a donkey. I want him coming in I'm a good Jewish boy, a Ferrari, a Lambo, a Tesla. Give me something good. Don't give me a donkey. That's how the prophet saw it. That's how he wanted. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi in the Gemara says, what's between these 2 interpretations? Which one is it? It can't be both. And he says it depends. If we merit the arrival of Mashiach, we get him coming through miracles with great kavod, wafting in from Shemayim on a cloud. But if we don't merit it, he's still going to come. He's definitely going to come, Mashiach. But he's going to come in a very mundane, physical. Chamor, donkey is chumrit, a physical way, riding like a poor person on a donkey. Obviously, we don't want the version of Zechariah. We want the version of Daniel, wafting in on clouds. I thought to myself, why did Daniel get that version? And Zechariah get that version? Why did they get given? We think, yeah, that's the way he gave it over. Why would it be? Why did Daniel get the version of the beautiful, miraculous arrival of Mashiach, and Zechariah gets, with all due respect, the lower version, the ultimate redemption, the lower version? I'm not sure of the answer, but I want to venture the following. Daniel saw destruction. Daniel saw despair. He saw the Beit Hamkidash destroyed. He saw challenge at the first Beit Hamkidash. He saw Babylon come and take us. He was an advisor to Nebuchadnezzar. His family were killed. He was kidnapped together with his three friends, Mishael, Hanan, and Azariah, into Bavel. He had to grow up over there, away from family, away from Torah, mitzvot. It was extremely difficult. He was tested, and he ended up becoming an advisor to seven great world leaders who used him to interpret riddles and dreams that they had had. And he was the one who was privy to the arrival date of Mashiach. something that only Yaakov Avinu was privy to. He went through all that challenge, that difficulty, and he accepted everything that happened to him. The version you see, Daniel, the version you see is the miraculous one. Zachariah had a different life, different challenges, but you went through such challenges, difficulty, you're going to see the miraculous. I believe, my friends, that we're seeing that today. It's so difficult for us. We're seeing so many challenges, so much war, people bombing our country, people in France, Germany, England, Middle East. The stories coming out of these countries that are happening to our brothers and sisters, the 15, 16 million Jews in the world, persecuted like it's 1938, 39. It's about to kick off again. And yet, Daniel saw that and saw worse, and yet he was privy to this revelation that it's all going to be good, and not only is it going to be good, it's going to be the best version of the redemption. The way to keep that going, and Daniel was very careful about this, was to take care of his friends. He literally saved the lives of the Jewish people, especially his close friends who were imprisoned with him in Babylonia, in Bavel. Friends, that is the key to our success. Having faith that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has our backs. The Mashiach is going to come. And even though we're seeing challenge and difficulty, we are guaranteed that Mashiach will come soon, B'ezrat Hashem. And we're going to see the greatest version, because we went through the worst times and challenges. We're going to see him coming in through great miracles, coming in a cloud. And God, in B'ezrat Hashem, we will all be able to return, just like he did, to Eretz Yisrael, to see the rebuilding of the third and final Beit Hamkidash. And God willing, we'll do this by avoiding machloket, and even if it comes to giving kids candy in the Beit Knesset and giving a smile to a child, dayenu. You should have a meaningful fast. Rabbi Mizrahi is going to take